Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Gaza peace talks proceed with mixed feelings. Government shutdown affects many workers and contractors. Legal challenges arise from Trump's potential use of the Insurrection Act. France faces ongoing political instability, with another prime minister resignation. Renewable energy surpasses coal globally, but the transition varies regionally. OpenAI reveals Chinese government use of ChatGPT for surveillance. North Korea continues cybercrime with record cryptocurrency heists. British parts found in Russian weaponry, intensifying sanctions. The Supreme Court's new term will focus on presidential power. Investigations into January 6th accuse of political weaponization. NASA funding cuts are a concern under the Trump administration. Controversy surrounds White House judicial actions and Republican opposition. The administration justifies lethal strikes against cartels. Macron faces calls to resign and call early elections. Protests escalate in Madagascar with military intervention. Gaza peace plan talks continue amidst hope and uncertainty. Recent news reports detail ongoing negotiations towards a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release, spearheaded by a U.S. peace plan proposed by Donald Trump. The core of the talks centers on an exchange involving the immediate cessation of hostilities and the return of Israeli hostages held by Hamas, with 47 still unaccounted for, including Tamir Nimrodi, whose mother, Harut Nimrodi, remains steadfastly hopeful for his survival. The plan's potential hinges on a phased release, beginning with the living hostages, followed by the remains of those who have perished. Despite 2 years of devastating conflict, marked by over 67,000 Palestinian deaths, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, and widespread displacement, the Trump plan has ignited renewed optimism. The negotiations involve indirect talks between Israeli and Hamas delegations, facilitated by Egyptian and Qatari intermediaries. Key players include U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Qatari Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani. The plan's immediate goal is to secure the release of the hostages, with Tamir Nimrodi's case particularly poignant, highlighting the immense emotional toll on families. Harut Nimrodi's unwavering belief in her son's survival underscores the profound desperation felt by many families. The conflict's backdrop is a protracted war initiated following Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack, which resulted in the deaths of 200 Israelis and the abduction of 251 others. The negotiations are occurring amidst a tense environment, with Israel continuing a military offensive in Gaza City. While the Trump plan outlines a framework for a potential agreement, including a Palestinian body administering Gaza and aid delivery, Netanyahu has repeatedly opposed a Palestinian state. The talks are considered crucial, representing a potential path toward ending the devastating conflict and securing the release of the remaining hostages. Government shutdown impacts federal contractors and workers. A partial government shutdown continues to create significant hardship for federal contractors and their employees, primarily low-wage service workers, across the United States. The ongoing political impasse has resulted in widespread furloughing of contract employees, disrupting essential services provided to federal buildings and institutions. The core issue centers on the failure of federal contractors to receive back pay, a benefit routinely afforded to furloughed federal employees. These workers, including cleaners, security guards, cafeteria staff, and office support personnel, are often reliant on these paychecks to meet their financial obligations. Several news outlets have highlighted the disproportionate impact on vulnerable populations, particularly single mothers and individuals with limited savings. The Smithsonian Institution, for instance, is preparing to close its museums if the shutdown persists, jeopardizing the livelihoods of hundreds of contracted employees. Legal experts emphasize that federal contractors are not entitled to back pay, a stark contrast to the treatment of federal employees. The Service Employees International Union, SEIU, estimates that over 500,000 federal contractors faced unemployment and lost income during the 2018-2019 shutdown. Efforts to secure back pay for these contractors have thus far been unsuccessful. Democratic lawmakers, including Senator Tina Smith and Representative Ayanna Pressley, have introduced legislation to address this issue, but the Trump administration has not indicated support. The situation underscores the broader economic consequences of government shutdowns, particularly for those employed in supporting roles within the federal government. The reliance on contract workers for critical services highlights a systemic vulnerability and raises concerns about the fairness of the current arrangement. The ongoing shutdown continues to create uncertainty and anxiety for these workers, many of whom are struggling to make ends meet while awaiting resolution. The lack of back pay underscores a fundamental inequity in the government's approach to managing its workforce and highlights the urgent need for a sustainable solution. Trump's potential use of the Insurrection Act sparks legal challenges. The recent news articles highlight escalating tensions surrounding the potential deployment of federal troops to cities experiencing protests, primarily fueled by the Trump administration's consideration of invoking the Insurrection Act. The core issue revolves around the administration's desire to quell unrest, particularly in Portland, Oregon, and the ensuing legal battles surrounding this action. Judge Karen Immergut has emerged as a critical figure, temporarily blocking the administration's attempt to federalize Oregon National Guard troops to address the Portland protests. Her rulings underscore the legal challenges posed by the administration's approach, emphasizing state and local authorities' capacity to manage the situation. Immergut's background reveals a history of bipartisan rulings, including her work during the Clinton impeachment investigation and subsequent judgments regarding immigration detention and gun control legislation. The Insurrection Act itself, established in 1792 and last significantly altered in 1871, grants the president authority to deploy federal forces in instances where state or local governments are unable or unwilling to enforce federal laws. The administration's justification centers on perceived violence and disruption stemming from the protests. However, Immergut's rulings highlight concerns about overstepping constitutional boundaries and potentially escalating tensions. Judge Immergut's career demonstrates a commitment to upholding the law, marked by her work during the Clinton impeachment, her handling of the George Floyd protests, and her previous roles as a prosecutor and judge. Her legal challenges are a significant obstacle to the administration's strategy and represent a broader debate about the limits of executive power and the role of federal intervention in domestic unrest. The legal battles surrounding the Insurrection Act continue, with Immergut's rulings representing a key moment in this ongoing struggle. French politics remain in crisis as Prime Minister resigns again, and France's political landscape continues to unravel with the unexpected resignation of Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu, just 26 days after his appointment. This marks the fifth change in leadership within 2 years, highlighting the deep-seated instability within the nation's governing structure. Initial reports indicated Lecornu's departure stemmed from intense partisan divisions and an inability to secure support from key political factions, particularly the conservative Republicans, LR party. The situation was exacerbated by the LR's opposition to Lecornu's cabinet selection, specifically the nomination of Bruno Le Maire as Minister of Defense, a move seen as a betrayal by the LR. Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau's sudden shift in stance, announcing his withdrawal from government just hours after the cabinet was unveiled, proved decisive. Lecornu, initially viewed as a loyal and capable presidential protégé, failed to navigate the complex political landscape. The resignation followed a similar pattern to that of his predecessors, Michel Barnier and François Bayrou, both of whom were ousted by parliamentary votes of no confidence. The underlying cause of the crisis lies in the fractured political environment, fueled by the upcoming 2020 presidential election. President Emmanuel Macron's unpopularity has led to a splintering of the center-right alliance, with figures like Gabriel Attal distancing themselves. The immediate aftermath saw a last-minute attempt to salvage the situation, with Macron granting Lecornu a 48-hour extension to persuade the LR to join the government. However, the core issues, the perceived betrayal by Le Maire and the broader political divisions, remained unresolved. The ongoing instability reflects a nation grappling with significant debt, 113% of GDP, and a deeply divided electorate, making the formation of a stable government a formidable challenge. The political turmoil underscores the precariousness of France's governing structure and the intense pressure facing President Macron as he attempts to steer the country through a period of profound political uncertainty. The LR's actions, combined with the broader political climate, have effectively stalled any progress towards establishing a functioning government. Renewables surpass coal as global electricity source, a regionally divergent transition. Recent data reveals a historic shift. Renewable energy sources have surpassed coal as the world's leading source of electricity generation for the first half of 2024. This milestone, highlighted by Ember, signifies that renewable growth has fully met global electricity demand increases, even contributing to a slight decline in coal and gas use. However, this transition is far from uniform, exhibiting significant regional disparities. Developing nations, particularly China, spearheaded the clean energy surge, while wealthier nations like the US and the European Union continue to rely more heavily on fossil fuels. China's dominance in clean tech is undeniable, with record clean tech exports reaching $20 billion in August 2025, primarily driven by electric vehicle and battery sales. Meanwhile, the US has drastically reduced its renewable energy forecasts for this decade, down to 250 GW from an initial prediction of 500 GW. The US is now focused on promoting oil and gas exports, contrasting with China's aggressive expansion of clean tech industries. Solar power accounted for 83% of the increase in electricity demand, becoming the largest source of new electricity generation for the third consecutive year, largely concentrated in lower-income countries, where costs have plummeted by 99.9% since 1975. Africa is experiencing a solar boom, with significant panel imports, exemplified by South Africa, Nigeria, Algeria, Zambia, and Botswana, each experiencing substantial growth. However, rapid solar expansion presents challenges, such as water table depletion in Afghanistan. Despite these regional differences, Ember considers this a crucial turning point, marking the beginning of a shift where clean power is keeping pace with demand. The UK and other wind belt nations face obstacles due to higher wind turbine costs and fluctuating supply, requiring backup power sources. China's overwhelming influence in clean tech remains unchallenged. The transition to renewable energy is occurring at a varied pace, influenced by policy decisions, technological advancements, and regional resource availability, creating a complex and evolving global energy landscape. OpenAI report reveals Chinese government use of ChatGPT for surveillance and propaganda. A recently published report by OpenAI has unveiled concerning evidence of Chinese government operatives utilizing ChatGPT for surveillance proposals and the promotion of politically motivated scanning tools. The report highlights a deliberate effort by state actors to leverage AI technology for seemingly mundane tasks, primarily data analysis and language refinement, rather than groundbreaking technological advancements. This revelation underscores the escalating contest between the United States and China for AI supremacy. The report details instances where a ChatGPT user, likely connected to a Chinese government entity, requested assistance in drafting a proposal analyzing the travel movements and police records of the Uyghur minority, a charge vehemently denied by Beijing. Simultaneously, another Chinese-speaking user sought guidance in designing promotional materials for a tool designed to scan social media platforms, including X and Facebook, for political and religious content. Both users were subsequently banned by OpenAI. This isn't an isolated incident. OpenAI's investigation revealed a broader trend. Suspected Russian, North Korean, and Chinese hackers have been employing ChatGPT to enhance their coding and craft more convincing phishing links. Notably, state actors previously struggling with basic language errors in influence operations are now utilizing AI to refine their messaging. China is actively developing an AI governance system characterized by a balance between development and security, incorporating innovation, security, and inclusiveness, alongside policy plans, ethical guidelines, and regulations. Despite these efforts, concerns remain regarding the potential misuse of AI technology. The report indicates a growing trend of state-backed and criminal hackers utilizing ChatGPT for diverse tasks, ranging from financial account management to researching criminal penalties for online scams. Remarkably, individuals are also leveraging ChatGPT to identify scams, with the AI model detecting scams up to 3 times more often than it's used for fraudulent activities. U.S. Cyber Command is exploring the use of AI, including exploiting software vulnerabilities in foreign equipment, although OpenAI refrained from directly confirming U.S. military or intelligence agency involvement. The Command's AI roadmap emphasizes accelerating AI adoption and scaling capabilities. Despite these developments, OpenAI maintains its commitment to utilizing AI in support of democratic values. North Korean cybercrime record-breaking cryptocurrency heists. The North Korean hackers are responsible for unprecedented levels of cryptocurrency theft, totaling over 2,000 billion stolen this year, according to research firm Elliptic. This represents approximately 13% of North Korea's gross domestic product, as estimated by the United Nations. The regime's cybercrime operations have evolved, shifting focus from targeting cryptocurrency companies to directly attacking wealthy individuals holding substantial crypto assets. This shift is driven by the relative lack of sophisticated security measures employed by high-net-worth individuals. Investigations reveal that the stolen funds are primarily used to finance North Korea's nuclear weapons and missile development programs. Elliptic's chief scientist, Dr. Tom Robinson, notes that the secretive nature of these attacks means the actual extent of North Korean cybercrime may be significantly higher, with many unreported thefts remaining unidentified due to the difficulty in definitively attributing attacks to the regime. Notable incidents include a 1.4 billion theft from cryptocurrency exchange Bybit in February and numerous smaller attacks, such as the 14 million heist from WOX and the 1.2 million theft from Cetify. These attacks demonstrate a diverse range of tactics and targets. Elliptic estimates that by 2025, the cumulative value of stolen crypto assets will exceed $6 billion. The regime's activities are bolstered by an elaborate, fake IT workers program designed to generate additional revenue and circumvent international sanctions. Elliptic has privately assisted victims of attacks, with losses reaching tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars. The largest single theft this year involved 100 million stolen from an individual. This year's activity far surpasses North Korea's previous record of 1.35 billion set in 2022. Tracking stolen funds utilizes blockchain transaction records, revealing recurring patterns in the tools and methods favored by North Korean hackers. The ongoing cybercrime represents a significant threat, highlighting the need for enhanced security measures and continued international efforts to combat these illicit activities. British parts in Russian weaponry, escalating sanctions and economic strain, and the United Kingdom is taking extremely seriously reports of British components appearing in Russian weaponry, prompting intensified sanctions efforts. The Department for Business and Trade (DBT) has recently focused on curbing the export of goods to Russia, specifically targeting battlefield items identified by Ukraine. Over 20 billion of UK trade with Russia is now subject to sanctions, with potential for large financial penalties or criminal prosecution for non-compliance. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly called for more effective sanctions, highlighting the presence of British microcomputers used for drone flight control within Russian missiles and drones deployed during attacks, notably the devastating strike on Lapavka, which resulted in the deaths of 4 members of a family. He emphasizes the critical need to dismantle any circumvention of existing sanctions, noting that allied nations possess detailed data on companies and products still utilized by Russia. Beyond British components, the issue extends to parts originating in China, Taiwan, and the Netherlands, further complicating the sanctions landscape. Despite being the most sanctioned nation globally, Russia has demonstrated resilience, adapting its economy and significantly increasing military spending, alongside securing energy export deals with China and India. However, Western experts are increasingly concerned about mounting economic strain, with Russian Minister for Economic Development, Maxim Reshetnikov, recently warning of a looming recession. The ongoing presence of Western-made components in Russian weaponry underscores the challenge of fully disrupting Russia's military capabilities and highlights the complex geopolitical ramifications of the conflict. The situation demands continued vigilance and a coordinated international response to effectively address the issue. The Supreme Court's new term, a focus on presidential power, the Supreme Court's upcoming term promises to significantly reshape the balance of power between the executive and judicial branches, primarily through a series of cases challenging President Donald Trump's actions and attempting to define the limits of presidential authority. The court's reliance on a shadow docket, issuing rulings without full arguments or explanations, has drawn criticism and raised concerns about transparency and accountability. Several key cases are already on the docket. The court will review Trump's attempts to deploy National Guard units in cities experiencing unrest, a move blocked by a federal judge. The court will also consider whether federal laws prohibit the president from removing agency members designed to be independent of presidential influence. A particularly significant case involves Trump's attempt to fire Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board, potentially expanding presidential control over American economic policy. The court is scheduled to examine Trump's unilaterally imposed tariffs on foreign imports, questioning their legal authority and considering potential voiding. Furthermore, the justices will delve into Trump's attempts to cut federal spending and fire lower-level government employees, alongside his aggressive immigration and deportation policies. A controversial case concerning automatic citizenship for those born on U.S. soil is also anticipated. Beyond these specific actions, the court will address broader legal questions, including the application of the Major Questions Doctrine, which the court previously used to strike down Biden's student loan forgiveness and environmental regulations. The court's decisions will be closely watched, as they could have significant implications for a range of policy areas. Several other cases are scheduled, including a challenge to a Colorado ban on conversion therapy, 2 cases concerning state bans on transgender athletes in interscholastic sports, and a dispute over a state law regarding mailed ballots. Additionally, conservative groups are challenging a provision of a voting rights law guaranteeing black voter representation, and the Republican Party is contesting a decades-old law restricting coordinated campaign spending. The court's conservative majority, currently 6-3, has already demonstrated a willingness to issue landmark rulings, reversing decades of existing precedent on issues such as abortion rights and college admissions. This trend is expected to continue, further polarizing public opinion about the court's role in American society. The upcoming term is expected to be highly consequential, potentially reshaping the legal landscape and continuing to fuel debates about the role of the judiciary in a politically charged environment. The court's decisions, anticipated by the end of June next year, will undoubtedly have lasting effects on American law and policy. January 6th investigation, GOP lawmakers accuse political weaponization. A recent revelation has ignited controversy surrounding Jack Smith's investigation into the January 6th Capitol attack. Senate Republicans have accused the FBI of engaging in political weaponization by obtaining phone records of 9 GOP lawmakers as part of the ongoing investigation. The records, spanning 2023, included those of Senators Lindsey Graham, Bill Hagerty, Josh Hawley, Dan Sullivan, Tommy Tuberville, Ron Johnson, Cynthia Lummis, Marsha Blackburn, and Representative Mike Kelly. The FBI, acting on court orders issued as part of Smith's investigation, secured these records, which documented phone numbers called and the duration of those calls, but crucially, not the content of the conversations. Republicans assert that the scope of the investigation suggests a deliberate attempt to target political opponents. Senator Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, unveiled the FBI record, emphasizing the use of a grand jury, a standard legal process for federal investigations. However, he also highlighted the lack of a clear justification for obtaining the records, reinforcing his belief in political motivations. FBI Director Kash Patel recently provided information regarding the subpoenas, further fueling Republican concerns. Patel's statement on X, formerly Twitter, directly accused the FBI of abusing its power. The legal battle over access to these records stemmed from the speech or debate clause of the Constitution, which protects lawmakers' communications related to their legislative duties. The dispute underscored the tension between the Justice Department's investigative authority and the constitutional rights of elected officials. The revelation has intensified the debate surrounding the January 6th investigation and raised questions about the potential for politically motivated actions by federal law enforcement. The focus remains on determining the true purpose of obtaining these records and assessing whether the investigation is being conducted fairly and objectively. Bill Nye warns of NASA funding cuts under Trump administration. Science communicator Bill Nye has issued a stark warning regarding a proposed plan by the Trump administration to significantly reduce funding for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. The announcement, reported by CNN, stems from a shift in the White House's priorities, moving away from space exploration towards bolstering the military. This decision has ignited concern within the scientific community, with Nye leading the charge in voicing his alarm. The proposed cuts, estimated to be around $3 billion, would impact numerous NASA programs, including the Mars 2020 rover mission, the James Webb Space Telescope, and potentially even the Artemis program aiming to return humans to the moon. Nye, a prominent advocate for science education and space exploration, expressed his deep apprehension about the ramifications of these cuts. He argued that diminishing NASA's budget would not only jeopardize scientific advancements, but also undermine America's leadership in space technology. Nye emphasized the critical importance of continued investment in space exploration for reasons beyond simply national prestige. He highlighted the potential for scientific discoveries, technological innovation, and the inspiration provided by space programs to young people. He believes that reducing NASA's funding represents a short-sighted decision that could have long-term consequences for the nation's scientific capabilities. The move reflects a broader trend within the current administration to prioritize military spending over scientific research and development. Critics argue that this approach neglects the significant return on investment that space exploration offers, including advancements in materials science, robotics, and communications technology. The debate surrounding NASA's funding is likely to continue as the administration moves forward with its budget proposals. White House judicial actions spark controversy and Republican rebuke. Recent legal actions by the Trump administration, primarily through judicial rulings, have drawn significant criticism and revealed a pattern of challenges to executive authority, even among Republican-appointed judges. The administration's attempts to utilize the military on U.S. soil to address protests in Portland, Oregon, resulted in a ruling against them by Judge Karen Immergut, a Trump appointee, who questioned the legality of establishing a martial law scenario. This marked the first major blow to the administration's strategy. The controversy escalated as Republican judges consistently ruled against administration actions. Cases involving the attempted suppression of academic freedom regarding pro-Palestinian viewpoints, the administration's efforts to curtail diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and attempts to restrict access to the Associated Press highlighted a broader trend of judicial resistance. The administration's attempts to redefine birthright citizenship and cut public health funding also faced legal challenges. Several cases involved the administration's use of tariffs, with judges questioning the legality of unilateral tariff actions. Furthermore, the administration's attempts to limit the voice of America and curb academic freedom sparked considerable debate. The administration's pursuit of a policy of ideological deportation, targeting pro-Palestinian legal immigrants, was also met with legal challenges. The consistent opposition from judges, including those appointed by Republican presidents, underscores a growing tension between the executive branch's agenda and the judiciary's role in upholding the rule of law. The pattern of rulings indicates a significant degree of resistance to the administration's legal strategies and raises questions about the future of executive power. The administration's attempts to redefine the legal landscape through judicial intervention have been largely unsuccessful, exposing vulnerabilities in its legal approach. The cases demonstrate a clear and concerning trend of judicial oversight and a significant challenge to the administration's legal strategy. Trump administration legal opinion justifies lethal strikes against cartels, AA recently revealed. Classified legal opinion produced by the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, COLC, authorizes the Trump administration to employ lethal strikes against a secret and expansive list of cartels and suspected drug traffickers. This opinion, developed without prior reporting, argues that the president possesses the authority to designate drug traffickers as enemy combatants and authorize their summary execution without legal review. The list extends beyond publicly designated terrorist organizations, representing a significant expansion of potential targets. The OLC opinion is considered legally significant due to its potential to grant the president an open-ended war against a secret group of entities. The Defense Department's legal basis for strikes in the Caribbean, heavily reliant on this opinion, identifies smugglers as unlawful combatants. Lawmakers have repeatedly requested a copy of the opinion, but the Justice Department and Department of Defense have not provided it, citing the president's discretion. Charles Young, the nominee for Army General Counsel, confirmed the interagency lawyers' working group's involvement, including representatives from the CIA, State Department, White House Counsel, and DoD General Counsel. Despite concerns raised by some military lawyers, particularly international law experts within the DOI's Office of General Counsel, the OLC opinion's interpretation prevails, leading to a reluctance among J's to openly dissent. The administration's intensified campaign against Latin American drug cartels involves expanded CA authorities for lethal targeting and covert action, alongside the military's strikes. A presidential finding dating back to the 1980s has been updated to provide greater clarity for the CIA, and the agency is deploying armed surveillance drones over Mexico. However, this expansion presents novel legal challenges, including the potential for lawsuits from U.S.-born citizens and green card holders harmed by the strikes. The Justice Department has carried out at least 4 strikes in the Caribbean, targeting individuals linked to designated cartels. Despite concerns, the administration continues to pursue this strategy, with the OLC opinion serving as its foundational legal justification. The situation remains complex, with ongoing debate within the administration regarding the legality and implications of these actions. Macron urged to resign, call early elections amidst political crisis. France is grappling with a severe political crisis, prompting calls for President Emmanuel Macron to step down and initiate early presidential elections. Édouard Philippe, Macron's former prime minister, has advised the president to appoint a new prime minister to facilitate the passage of a budget and subsequently hold elections, suggesting this is the most viable path toward resolving the ongoing instability. Philippe's statement follows the resignation of Sébastien Lecornu, France's third prime minister in a year, after his unsuccessful attempt to form a government. Adding to the pressure, Gabriel Attal, leader of Macron's Renaissance Party and previously prime minister for 6 months, publicly expressed his lack of understanding regarding the president's decisions, indicating a significant fracture within Macron's support base. The repeated failures of Macron's attempts to regain control, occurring 3 times within the past year, have highlighted the depth of the crisis. The core issue stems from Macron's loss of parliamentary majority following a snap election triggered by a defeat in the European Parliament vote. This loss has significantly hampered his ability to govern effectively. The increasing criticism isn't solely coming from opposition parties. Macron's own allies are voicing concerns, demonstrating the seriousness of the situation. Macron was observed walking alone by the Seine in Paris, accompanied by security personnel, a visual representation of the turmoil surrounding his presidency. Philippe's advice underscores a strategic shift, advocating for a move towards power sharing. The situation is rapidly evolving, with Macron reportedly prepared to take responsibility if the last-ditch efforts fail, though the specifics of this potential action remain undefined. The public's waning confidence in Macron's leadership is a key factor driving these developments, signaling a potential turning point in French politics. Madagascar protests escalate amidst military intervention. Madagascar's political landscape has dramatically shifted as President Andry Rajoelina appointed Army General Rufin Fortunat Zafasambo as Prime Minister, a move intended to quell ongoing youth-led protests. The appointment follows Rajoelina's previous dismissal of Prime Minister Christian Ence and his cabinet, a strategic attempt to appease the demonstrators. The protests, spearheaded by the Gen Z Mada movement, began in September due to widespread dissatisfaction regarding persistent water and power shortages, coupled with concerns about corruption, unemployment, and the rising cost of living. The movement's continued demands for Rajoelina's resignation have not been met. The protests, now entering their third week, have resulted in at least 22 deaths and over 100 injuries, according to UN estimates, figures the government disputes as based on misinformation. Security forces have engaged in clashes with demonstrators across major cities including Antananarivo, Toliara, and Diego Suarez, with one young man sustaining injuries. Former President Marc Ravalomanana and other opposition leaders have voiced strong support for the protesters, criticizing Rajoelina's lack of responsiveness. Ravalomanana believes Zafasambo's appointment will be ineffective, given his prior role in the Prime Minister's office. Madagascar's instability is rooted in a history of uprisings since independence in 1960, including significant protests in 2009. The nation faces considerable economic challenges, with 75% of its population living below the poverty line and limited access to electricity. The IMF reports that only approximately one-third of Madagascar's 30 million people have access to electricity, highlighting the deep-seated issues contributing to the unrest. The appointment of Zafasambo represents a significant escalation of military involvement in the country's political affairs, intensifying the crisis and raising concerns about the future stability of the nation. The situation remains volatile, with the protesters' demands unresolved and the government's response demonstrating a reliance on security forces to maintain control.